One man took the woman he loved to a place no one expected. A place so poor, many people would run away without thinking twice. But he was not just showing her his home. He was testing her heart. Would she stay with him or leave like the others before her? And when she made her choice, would it change everything? Sit back, relax, and let's dive into this story. One quiet evening in the city of Asaba, a man named Dazibo walked slowly with the woman he loved, whose name was Tama. They walked through a poor, narrow street. The area was quiet, the road was rough, and old houses with rusty roofs stood close together. It was the kind of place where poor people and those who could not afford decent houses lived. Tama looked around slowly. This was not the kind of place she imagined Dazebo lived. Tama had asked him several times where he lived, but Dazebo always smiled and changed the topic. At first, she did not think much about it, but with time, she began to feel that he might be hiding something. Now, as they walked together in silence, she sensed that the truth was finally about to appear. Dazebo glanced at her briefly, then looked away again. His heart was beating harder than usual. He had faced powerful businessmen without fear. He had signed deals worth millions without hesitation, but this moment made him nervous. Because this moment was not about business. This moment was about his heart. This was the moment that would tell him whether Tama truly loved him, or whether she would walk away like the others. Because Tama was not the first woman he had brought to that small house. In the past months, Dazebo had brought a few women there, hoping to see if any of them truly cared about him. But the moment they got to the house, their faces changed. Some made excuses and left quickly. Others became distant after that day and slowly disappeared from his life. None of them stayed long enough to see the man behind the poverty. That was why Dazebo's heart was beating so heavily now. He had seen this moment before, and he knew exactly how it usually ended. Dazebo stopped walking. Tama stopped too. They stood in front of a small, old building. The house looked extremely poor. The roof was covered with old, rusty zinc. Some parts were bent and worn out, and during the rainy season, water leaked through several places inside the house. Wild grasses had grown tall around the compound, thick and untidy. They were so high that anyone looking at them would worry that snakes might easily hide there. Even the front door was very old. It was made of wood and zinc, but the wood had worn out, and the zinc nailed to it had become so rusty that it broke when touched. Dazebo reached into his pocket and brought out a key. Then he unlocked it. The door opened slowly. Dazebo stepped aside and forced a small smile. "Tama," he said quietly, "welcome to my house." Tama did not move immediately. She stood at the entrance and looked inside. The walls of the house were cracked and faded. In some places, the plaster had fallen off completely, leaving the rough blocks exposed. The wooden windows were old and rusty. The frames had weakened with time, and they looked like they could fall apart if someone pushed them too hard. The room was painfully small. There was a small bed on the floor. One plastic chair stood by the wall. A small wooden table sat quietly in the corner. There was no fan, no television, no cupboard, nothing that made the place feel like a comfortable home. The room felt empty and still. For a moment, Tama said nothing. Dazebo watched her face carefully. He saw the surprise in her eyes, then confusion, then something deeper he could not immediately understand. "Dazebo," she finally said, "is this really where you live?" He swallowed. "Yes," he replied. Tama looked at him properly now, as if she was seeing him from a different angle. All this time she had known him as a quiet and humble man. A noble man who worked very hard. She knew he dressed simply. She knew he lived modestly. But this was something else. "This is why you never wanted to talk about your house?" she asked. Dazebo gave a small nod. He had already prepared the answer in his mind long before this day. "I was stranded when I first came to Asaba," he said quietly. "I could not afford anything better. A friend helped me get this place for now. I've just been managing and trying to save." Tama's eyes slowly moved around the room again. She imagined him returning here every evening after work, sleeping on that small bed, sitting alone in that quiet room, living this way without saying a word. A heavy feeling settled in her chest. "You should have told me," she said. Dazebo looked down. Tama stepped inside the room at last. She touched the plastic chair lightly, then turned back to him. "Why would you hide something like this from me? Did you think I would laugh at you or look down on you?" Dazebo quickly shook his head. "No, that is not what I thought." "Then what were you thinking?" she asked. Dazebo sighed. "I was scared." "Scared of what?" Dazebo looked at her. For a brief second, the secret he was carrying felt too heavy to hold. "Scared of losing you," he said. Tama's expression softened slightly. "You still should have trusted me. When someone cares about you, hiding something like this hurts." Dazebo nodded slowly. "I know, and I'm sorry." Then the room was quiet for a moment. Dazebo watched Tama carefully. This was usually the moment when things changed. This was the moment when people's expressions shifted, when disappointment appeared on their faces and they began to pull away from him. But this time, something was different. The way Tama was speaking did not sound like someone who was judging him. It sounded like someone who truly cared. Dazebo felt surprised. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. For a brief moment, he just stood there looking at her, wondering if he had heard her correctly. Then he finally spoke. "Please sit down. Let me go and buy us something cold to drink." Tama looked at the chair, then back at him. "All right," she said. Dazebo nodded and stepped outside. As he walked quickly to the nearby shop, many thoughts filled his mind. He bought 2 cold drinks and hurried back. But when he stepped into the house again, he suddenly stopped. The chair was empty. The room was silent. Tama was gone. Dazebo stood still, holding the drinks in both hands. For a moment, he could not breathe. His eyes slowly searched the house, but it was too small for anyone to hide. It just hit him heavily. "She left," he whispered. A painful smile appeared on his face. So this is how it happens again. Then suddenly, he heard Tama's voice from outside the window. "Dazebo," she called. "How do you even manage in a place like this? Is there even a bathroom here?" Dazebo turned quickly. She was standing outside the house at the backyard, looking around the side of the building with a curious expression. He froze. She had not left. She was still there. Dazebo stood still for a moment, holding the 2 cold drinks in his hands. He stepped outside and went to meet Tama where she was standing. Tama was standing beside a small broken wall near the back of the house. She was looking around the compound, studying everything carefully. When she noticed him, she frowned slightly. "Where is your bathroom?" she asked. Dazebo blinked, still trying to calm his breathing. "There. There is a small one behind the house," he said, pointing. Tama followed the direction of his hand and nodded slowly. "Oh," she said. "I see it." Then she looked back at him. She noticed the strange expression on his face. "Why do you look like that?" she asked. Dazebo hesitated. For a moment, he did not know whether to laugh or feel embarrassed. "I thought you left," he admitted quietly. Tama looked surprised. "Left?" she repeated. "Yes," Dazebo said. "When I came back and did not see you inside, I thought you had gone." Tama stared at him for a second, trying to read the expression on his face. Then she shook her head slowly. "You really thought I would leave you just because of this place?" she asked. Dazebo looked down, not answering. Tama walked closer to him. "Dazebo," she said gently, "do you think I am that kind of person?" He sighed softly. "I do not know," he said honestly. "I have seen many things in my life." Tama looked at him carefully. For the first time that evening, she noticed something deeper in his eyes. Something beyond embarrassment. Pain. The kind of pain that comes from disappointment that has happened too many times. She softened immediately. Listen to me." She stepped closer and placed her hand on his arm. "What I feel for you has nothing to do with this house." Dazebo lifted his head and looked at her. "I care about you," she continued, "not about where you live or what you own." Her voice was calm but sincere. "I love you, Dazebo." The words landed powerfully in the air between them. For a moment, Dazebo could not move. He had heard those words before in his life, but somehow, this moment felt different. It felt simple, but real. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words did not come out immediately. He began, struggling. Tama smiled gently. "You do not have to say anything." Then she pulled him into a warm hug. Dazebo stood there for a moment before slowly wrapping his arms around her. His chest felt tight, not from fear this time, but from emotion. After a few seconds, Tama pulled back slightly and looked at him. "From now on," she said, "after work, we will come here together so I can stay here with you for a while before I go home." Dazebo looked surprised. "Here?" he asked. "Yes," she said, smiling. "This is where you live, right?" He nodded slowly. "Then this place is fine," Tama said. Dazebo could not stop the small smile that appeared on his face. For the first time that evening, the heavy feeling in his chest began to fade. "Come," he said, lifting the drink slightly. "I brought something cold." They went back inside the small room. Tama sat on the plastic chair while Dazebo sat on the small bed. They opened the drinks and began to talk. They talked about work. They laughed about small things that happened in the office. They shared stories from their past. Time passed quietly without them noticing. Later that night, Dazebo walked Tama to the nearby bus stop. When they reached the bus stop, Tama turned to him. "Thank you for trusting me enough to bring me here," she said. Dazebo looked at her. "Thank you for staying," he replied. Tama smiled. "Good night, Dazebo." "Good night, Tama." She stepped into the bus and waved before the door closed. Dazebo stood there watching as the bus slowly drove away. When it disappeared down the road, he finally turned and walked back to the old house. That night, as he lay on the small bed in his room, he stared at the rusty roof for a long time. Tama's words echoed in his mind. "I love you." He placed his arm behind his head and sighed softly. "I love her too," he whispered quietly to himself. That night, one thought still worried Dazebo. What would happen when she finally discovered who he really was? Dazebo was not an ordinary man. Dazebo was the only son of Mr. Jabba, a wealthy businessman in the city of Buguma whose company operated across several cities. In his real life, Dazebo lived in a large mansion, drove expensive cars, and managed important business decisions. Yet here he was, lying on a small bed in a tiny room inside an old house, pretending to be a poor office clerk. All of it was part of the plan his father had suggested. After he discovered that the woman he once planned to marry never truly loved him, Dazebo had lost faith in love. His father believed the only way to find someone genuine was to remove money from the picture. So Dazebo left his comfortable life and came to Asaba to live as an ordinary man. At first, it was only meant to be an experiment, but everything changed when he met Tama. Dazebo stared at the ceiling. He closed his eyes slowly. For the first time in a long while, someone looked at him without knowing about his wealth and still chose him. But that truth also created a new problem. Tama believed he was just a simple man trying to survive in the city. She believed the small house was his real home. She believed the struggles she saw were his real life, but none of it was true. Dazebo sat up slowly and rubbed his hands together. "How do I tell her now?" he murmured quietly. If he told her the truth, she might feel betrayed. She might think he had lied to her from the beginning, but if he kept hiding it, the lie would only grow bigger. He sighed deeply. "I cannot keep pretending forever," he said softly to himself. Dazebo reached for his phone and stared at the screen for a moment. Then he called his father. After a few rings, Mr. Jabba answered. "My son," his father's calm voice came through the phone. "How are you?" Dazebo leaned back against the wall. "Father, I think I am in trouble." Mr. Jabba laughed lightly. "What kind of trouble?" Dazebo hesitated before answering. "I met someone. Her name is Tama." There was a brief silence on the other end. "And? What happened to her?" Mr. Jabba asked. Dazebo took a deep breath. "I think she loves me, but she does not know who I really am." Mr. Jabba became quiet. Then he spoke again. "So the test is beginning to become real." Dazebo looked around the small room again. "Yes," he said softly, "and I'm afraid of what will happen when she finally discovers the truth." There was a brief silence on the phone. Then Mr. Jabba spoke in a calm voice. "My son, when the heart begins to care deeply for someone, fear will always follow. That is normal." Dazebo listened quietly. "But remember something important," Mr. Jabba continued. "Truth may sometimes cause pain, but a lie that continues for too long causes even greater damage." Dazebo sighed softly. "I know," he said. Mr. Jabba's voice remained gentle. "If this woman truly loves you, she will eventually understand why you were afraid," he said. "But when the time comes, do not hide forever. Love cannot grow where the truth is constantly hiding." Dazebo looked Rusty Roof again. "I will tell her soon," he said quietly. "Good," Mr. Jabba replied, "because the right woman will not only love your wealth or your struggles, she will love the man you are." The call ended, but Mr. Jabba's words stayed in Dazebo's mind long after the phone went silent. And deep inside, Dazebo knew one thing. Sooner or later, the truth would have to come out. As the weeks passed, Dazebo and Tama continued growing closer to each other. At work, they tried to act like nothing had changed. They spoke normally with other workers. They focused on their duties. But people were not blind. Everyone in the office could see that something special was forming between them. Sometimes they walked into the office together in the morning. Sometimes they left the building together in the evening. And sometimes, during lunch break, they sat outside and shared quiet conversations. Those small moments were enough to make people talk. Some workers simply watched with curiosity, but one person in particular was not happy about it. Mr. Omari. Mr. Omari was one of the senior staff members in the office. He had worked in the company for many years and handled several important administrative duties. Because of his long time in the company, many of the junior workers feared him and tried not to get on his bad side. He was known for being strict and sometimes difficult to work with. But there was another reason why Mr. Omari did not like what he was seeing. Some months earlier, he had shown interest in Tama and tried to get close to her. Tama had politely turned him down. Since that day, Mr. Omari had never been comfortable seeing her around another man, especially someone he believed was just a poor office clerk. And that was why his attitude toward Dazebo slowly became worse. One afternoon, while most workers were busy at their desks, Mr. Omari called out loudly, "Dazebo!" Dazebo looked up from the files he was arranging. "Yes, sir." "Come here," Mr. Omari said. Dazebo walked over. Mr. Omari pointed to a stack of documents on his table. "Take these files to the storage room." Dazebo nodded. "Yes, sir." He carried the files and did as he was told. A few minutes later, Mr. Omari called him again. "Dazebo!" Dazebo returned. "Yes, sir." "Bring me a bottle of water." Dazebo went to the small office kitchen and brought back a bottle of water. Mr. Omari took it. Then he said, "Now clean this desk." Dazebo paused slightly. He had already finished most of his tasks for the day, but he knew arguing would only create more problems. So he quietly picked up a duster and cleaned the desk. Mr. Omari leaned back in his chair, watching him with a small smile. "You think you are important in this office?" he asked suddenly. Dazebo looked up calmly. "No, sir," he replied. Mr. Omari laughed. "Good," he said, "because you are nothing here." Dazebo did not respond, but inside he was slowly losing patience. Mr. Omari continued, "You should be grateful you even have a job here." Dazebo took a slow breath. Then he spoke quietly. "Sir, I respect you, but please treat me with respect too." The room suddenly became quiet. Mr. Omari's smile disappeared. "What did you just say?" "I only said we should respect each other," Dazebo replied calmly. Mr. Omari stood up quickly. "How dare you talk back to me?" he shouted. He grabbed Dazebo's shirt. "Apologize right now," he demanded. Dazebo looked at him firmly. "I did nothing wrong," he said. Mr. Omari's anger grew. "Say sorry," he shouted again. Dazebo shook his head slightly. "I cannot apologize for asking to be treated like a human being." Without warning, Mr. Omari raised his hand and slapped Dazebo across the face. The sound echoed through the office. Everyone froze. Dazebo held his cheek but did not fight back. At that moment, a sharp voice cut through the room. "Is this how you treat people here?" It was Tama. She had stepped out of her office after hearing the noise. Her eyes moved from Mr. Omari to Dazebo's face. "What are you doing?" she demanded. Mr. Omari frowned. "This is none of your business," he said. Tama stepped forward confidently. "It becomes my business when someone is being treated unfairly," she replied. Mr. Omari hesitated. Tama's voice remained firm. "If you touch him again, I will report this to management." For a moment, the room stayed silent. Then Mr. Omari slowly released Dazebo's shirt. He looked around and realized everyone was watching. With a small hesitation, he sat back down. Dazebo straightened his shirt quietly. Tama walked closer to him. "Are you okay?" Dazebo nodded. "I'm fine." But inside, his heart was heavy, not because of the slap, but because Tama had defended him without knowing the truth about who he really was. And as she stood up for him like that, the secret he was hiding felt even heavier in his heart. Later that evening, after the incident at the office, Dazebo could not stop thinking about what had happened. The sound of the slap still echoed in his mind, but what troubled him more was not the humiliation. It was Tama, the way she had stepped forward without hesitation, the way she had defended him in front of everyone. She had spoken with courage, believing she was protecting a man who had no power in that office. Dazebo sat quietly on the small bed inside the old house. The room was calm, but his thoughts were restless. He looked around the small space again. For months now, he had lived in that house, pretending it was his real life. All of it was part of the plan. But now the test no longer felt simple, because Tama had become more than just part of the test. She had become someone he genuinely cared about. Dazebo leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees. How do I tell her the truth? If he revealed everything, Tama might feel betrayed. She might believe he had been lying to her from the very beginning. But if he continued hiding the truth, the lie would only grow larger. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Dazebo looked up. "Tama?" he asked. "Yes." Her voice came from outside. He quickly stood up and opened the door. Tama stepped inside. He had left the office earlier than her that evening, and she assumed it was because of the incident that had happened at work earlier that day. She looked at him carefully. "I've been thinking about what happened today." Dazebo closed the door slowly. "It's nothing," he replied. "I'm fine." Tama shook her head. "No, you are not." She walked further into the room and sat on the plastic chair. "You should not allow people to treat you that way," she continued. Dazebo smiled faintly. "Sometimes it is easier to stay quiet." Tama looked at him seriously. "You deserve respect, Dazebo." Her words touched him deeply. Because if she knew who he truly was, the situation would be completely different. Tama then studied his face for a moment. "You have been thinking a lot lately," she said. Dazebo hesitated. Then he asked a question that had been sitting in his heart for days. Tama, what would you do if someone you love was hiding something from you? Tama frowned slightly. Hiding something, she repeated. Yes, something important. Tama thought about it for a moment. If the secret hurt me, she said slowly, I would feel disappointed, but I would still want to understand why they hid it. Dazebo looked at her quietly. Tama smiled. Everyone has things they are afraid to say, she added. Her kindness made the secret feel even heavier in Dazebo's heart. That night after Tama left, Dazebo picked up his phone and called his father. After a few rings, Mr. Jabba answered. My son, Mr. Jabba said calmly. How is everything going? Dazebo sighed. Father, I think this is becoming difficult. Mr. Jabba was silent for a moment. Tell me why, he said. Dazebo rubbed his forehead. Tama trusts me completely, he said, but she does not know who I really am. Mr. Jabba spoke slowly. You knew this moment would come. I know, Dazebo replied, but I am afraid of hurting her. Mr. Jabba sighed softly on the other end of the line. My son, truth has a way of revealing itself sooner or later. Dazebo leaned back against the wall. I just hope when that moment comes, she will still look at me the same way. One morning, Dazebo woke up earlier than usual. He had barely slept the night before. He sat up slowly on the small bed. That morning he had made up his mind. Today, I will tell her, he said to himself. When he entered the office, Tama was already at her desk. She looked up and smiled when she saw him. Good morning, Dazebo, she said. Good morning, he replied. But Tama noticed something unusual immediately. You look serious today. Is everything okay? Dazebo nodded slowly. Yes, but there is something I need to tell you later. Tama looked curious. Something important? Yes, he said quietly. All right, she replied. We can talk later at lunch. Dazebo nodded, but his heart was still restless. The day moved slowly. At lunchtime, he and Tama stood outside the company building. They were talking. He looked at her. Tama, he said, there is something Mr. Omari suddenly appeared. Dazebo, he said sharply, go and get me those onboarding documents files from the store. I am on break, Dazebo replied calmly. I will do it later. Mr. Omari's face changed immediately. Who do you think you are to talk to me like that? He asked angrily. Before Dazebo could respond, Mr. Omari stepped closer and grabbed the front of his shirt tightly. Several workers nearby stopped and turned to watch. You think you can speak to me like that? Mr. Omari shouted. Dazebo remained calm. I only said I will do it after my break, he replied. Mr. Omari's anger grew even worse. At that moment, Tama rushed forward. What are you doing? She shouted. She quickly moved toward them and tried to push Mr. Omari back. Mr. Omari frowned. Stay out of this, Tama, he said, pushing Tama back with his other hand. Tama looked at him with anger. Stop all this now, she said firmly. The area became quiet, but Mr. Omari still refused to release Dazebo's shirt. Just then, two black luxury vehicles slowly drove into the premises. When the vehicles stopped, men in suits stepped out first. Then the second car door opened. An elderly man stepped out calmly. The moment some senior staff saw him, their expressions changed instantly. It's the chairman, someone whispered. Mr. Jabba walked slowly and looked around the premises. Then his eyes landed on the scene outside the office, so his gaze moved to Dazebo. Then he noticed Mr. Omari, whose hand was still gripping Dazebo's shirt, unaware of Mr. Jabba's presence. Mr. Jabba walked forward with calm authority. When he reached them, he spoke in a firm voice. Dazebo, what is going on here? The entire office fell silent. Dazebo felt everyone in the office staring at him, and in that moment, he realized something terrible. The truth he had been afraid to reveal was about to reveal itself. The entire office stood still. Everyone's eyes moved between Dazebo and the elderly man who had just arrived. Some workers had already recognized him. Mr. Jabba, the powerful chairman of the company. But what confused them most was the way he had just called out to Dazebo, like a father calling his son. Tama stood beside Dazebo, trying to understand what was happening. Her eyes slowly moved from Mr. Jabba to Dazebo. "Dazebo," she said softly. "Do you know him?" Dazebo's heart was beating fast. He had imagined telling Tama the truth in many times, but never like this. Never in front of the entire office. Mr. Jabba looked at Dazebo carefully. "My son," he said calmly, "I asked you a question. I came to see this branch and to check on you. You've been here for a long time. Now tell me, what is going on here?" The word son echoed through the premises like a loud bell. People began whispering immediately. Did he just say his son? That clerk? This cannot be possible. Tama's face slowly turned pale with shock. Her eyes widened as she looked at Dazebo again. "Your son?" someone repeated quietly. Mr. Omari suddenly felt his stomach tighten. He remembered every moment he had ordered Dazebo around. Every time he had insulted him, every time he had treated him like someone who did not matter. Now fear slowly crept into his chest. Dazebo finally spoke. "Father," he said quietly. The premises became even more silent. There was no longer any doubt. The simple office clerk they had been ordering around was actually the chairman's son. Mr. Jabba turned to the senior staff members. "What exactly is happening here?" he asked with authority. Before anyone could answer, Mr. Omari stepped forward nervously. "Sir, it was just a small misunderstanding," he said quickly. But Mr. Jabba's sharp eyes had already noticed the tension. His expression slowly hardened. He turned his gaze back to Mr. Omari. "What kind of misunderstanding makes you grip his shirt in that manner?" he asked. Mr. Omari's voice broke. I did not know he was your son," he stammered. Mr. Jabba's voice became colder. "That is not the point." The premises fell completely silent. "No employee in this company should be treated with disrespect," Mr. Jabba continued. "Whether they are the chairman's son or the newest worker." Mr. Omari lowered his head, unable to speak. Mr. Jabba looked at Mr. Omari again. "Until the management reviews this situation, you are relieved of your duties," he said firmly. Mr. Omari stood there in shock. "Yes, sir," he murmured, before slowly stepping away. Mr. Jabba immediately went into the office building to meet with the branch manager, which was the reason he had come in the first place. But Tama was not paying attention to any of that. Her world had suddenly become quiet. She looked at Dazebo again, the simple man she had believed she knew, the man who had shown her an old and a difficult life, the man she had trusted completely. "You," she said. Her voice trembled. "You're the chairman's son?" Dazebo could not look away from her eyes. "Yes," he said quietly. Tama did not know what to feel in that moment. Confusion, shock, and something deeper. Disappointment. "All this time," she said slowly. Her voice shook. "All this time you let me believe you were just a poor clerk." Dazebo tried to speak. "Tama, I was going to tell you," but she raised her hand gently, stopping him. "Please," she said. Her eyes were now filled with tears. "Just stop." The office around them had faded from her mind. All she could think about was one thing. "You made me believe your life was a struggle," she said with a calm, emotional voice. "You made me believe that old house, that small room, was your real home." Dazebo took a step closer. "I never wanted to hurt you. I only wanted to know if someone could love me if money was not in the picture." Tama shook her head slowly. "That was not your decision to make," she replied. Her voice was calm now, but full of hurt. "You took away my right to choose." For a moment, Dazebo just stood there, not knowing what to say. Her words hit him harder than he expected. "Tama, I trusted you," she said, cutting him in. Tears rolled down her cheeks. And the whole time, you were testing me. The silence between them felt heavy. Finally, Tama stepped back. I need space, she said quietly. Then she turned and walked away. Dazebo stood there, unable to move. The truth he had been afraid to tell had finally come out. But the moment he feared the most had also arrived. Tama was gone, and he did not know if she would ever forgive him. Just then, Dazebo felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned around. It was Mr. Jaba, his father. What happened? Mr. Jaba asked with concern. She left, Dazebo said, his voice full of emotion. Mr. Jaba held Dazebo's arm gently and took a deep breath before speaking. Don't worry, everything will be fine. You will see her again. A few moments later, Dazebo followed his father into the luxury vehicle and they drove away. The days that followed felt long and heavy for Dazebo. Even though he had returned to the city of Buguma with his father, his mind was still in Asaba, still in that office, still in the moment when Tama walked away from him. At home, everything around him was the same as before. The large mansion, the expensive cars, the quiet luxury he had grown up with. But none of it brought him any comfort. One evening, as he sat quietly in the living room, Mr. Jaba walked in and sat beside him. You are still thinking about her, Mr. Jaba said gently. Dazebo sighed. Yes, he replied. Mr. Jaba nodded slowly. I made a mistake, he said. I pushed you into this test. I thought it would protect you. Dazebo shook his head. No, father, he said. The test did not fail. Mr. Jaba looked at him. What do you mean? Dazebo leaned back in his chair. She loved me when she believed I had nothing, he said quietly. That means her love was real. Mr. Jaba nodded slowly. But you also hurt her, he added. I know, Dazebo replied. Across the city, Tama was also struggling with her thoughts. Every night she replayed the moment in the office again and again. The moment when she realized Dazebo was not the man she thought he was. At first she felt angry, then she felt betrayed. But as the days passed, another feeling slowly took over. Understanding. She remembered the way Dazebo had looked at her, the way he listened when she spoke, the way he treated her with kindness. None of those things had felt fake. One afternoon, while sitting quietly in her new office, Tama received a message. Mr. Jaba had arranged for Tama's transfer to the company's headquarters after the incident in Asaba. Not only that, Mr. Jaba had also promoted her and provided her with accommodation so she could settle comfortably in the city. A week later, Tama resumed work at the headquarters. That morning, while she was settling into her new office, a message arrived from the chairman's office. The message was simple. Please come to the CEO's office. Tama took a deep breath and stood up. Then she slowly walked toward the chairman's office. When she entered, she was surprised by what she saw. Dazebo was already there, seated. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them carried weeks of emotions. Mr. Jaba stood up calmly. I will leave you both to talk, he said. Then he walked out of the office. Dazebo slowly stood up and stepped towards Tama. I'm sorry, he said softly. Tama looked at him. Her eyes were no longer angry, but they still carried pain. You should have trusted me, she said. I know, Dazebo replied. I thought I was protecting myself, he continued. But in the end, I only hurt you. Tama took a slow breath. I was angry at first, she admitted. But then I started thinking about everything we shared. She looked into his eyes. You never treated me like someone you wanted to impress, she said. You treated me like someone you truly cared about. Dazebo nodded. Because I do care about you, he said. There was a long pause. Then Tama stepped closer. I forgive you. Dazebo's shoulders relaxed, as if a heavy weight had finally been lifted. Tama, he said quietly. Thank you. She smiled. But do not ever test my heart like that again, she added. Dazebo smiled for the first time in many days. "I promise," he said. A few months later, their lives had changed in many ways, but their love had grown even stronger. One evening, Dazebo took Tama to a quiet restaurant. After dinner, he stood up slowly and went down on one knee. Tama looked at him in surprise. Dazebo opened a small ring box. "Tama," he said gently, "you loved me when you believed I had nothing. That is something I will never forget. All my life, I met people who were interested in the life around me, the cars, the houses, the money. But you saw none of that." He smiled softly. "You saw me as a man who was struggling, a man who had very little, and yet you stayed. You cared for me, you defended me, and you loved me unconditionally." Tama's eyes were already beginning to shine with emotion. "You made me feel something I had almost forgotten," Dazebo continued quietly. "Peace." He took her hand gently. "When I was with you, I did not feel like a businessman or the son of a powerful man. I simply felt like myself, and somehow that was enough for you." His voice softened. "You made me feel safe. You made me feel loved, and for the first time in my life, I truly understood what it means to share life with someone who loves you for who you are, not for what you have." He took a slow breath and smiled. "I cannot imagine walking through this life without you beside me. Will you marry me?" "Yes, I will marry you, Dazebo," she said with her voice filled emotional excitement. Dazebo gently slid the ring onto her finger and stood up, smiling widely with genuine joy. He pulled her close into a warm embrace. People around the restaurant smiled and clapped for them, but even as they hugged tightly, Dazebo's eyes remained fixed on Tama. 3 months later, their wedding day arrived. The hall was filled with family, friends, and colleagues. Flowers decorated the hall. Music filled the air. Dazebo stood proudly beside Tama as they exchanged their vows. Across the room, Mr. Jabba watched with a warm smile. His son had finally found what he had been searching for all along. Not wealth, not power, but something far more valuable. True love. And this time, it was real. My wonderful viewers, true love is not about money or comfort. It is about seeing someone's heart and choosing to stay. What do you think about this story? Do you think Tama did the right thing? Share your thoughts in the comments section. I would really love to read from you. A more interesting story will be coming in a few days, so make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss it. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and share it with your friends. Thank you so much for watching.